This is Thinker Be Eaten, and Larry, the contractor guy, is here for round two about that wonderful world of Nazis. And I think we're going to take a little bit of a walk on the spiritual side. So I'm going to let you take it away. We did touch a little bit upon it last time, but now you're going to explore those spiritual realities a little bit deeper, huh?
Yeah. I thought about we talked about Lucifer and Satan, and I expressed my belief that they're one and the same. That Lucifer was the name of the cherub, the fallen angel. That was his name given by Almighty God, and when he fell, he became Satan, the adversary. I have a lead in here that some stuff I'd like to read from a man named Peter Goodgame. He wrote a article called "A 21st Century Defense of Christianity."
Yeah, he's at the website Red Moon Rising?
Yeah. I don't agree with all of his theological beliefs, but he does have some good things to say, and he does some pretty good research. So I'd like to read a little bit from what he wrote.
Sure.
The study of ancient history has been a goldmine of information which has brought forth evidence that substantiates the biblical view that a higher race of beings once intimately interacted with ancient civilizations. Zachariah Sitchin is perhaps the most influential of these researchers. For over 25 years or so, this man has gathered evidence from ancient Sumerian, Egyptian, Hittite, and other records, which all point to a time when nations were controlled by a higher race, the gods of mythology, gods with a little g. The Sumerian records are the most ancient, and many date back to well past 2000 BC. These records were kept on baked clay tablets and thus escaped decay. They've been uncovered on a massive scale during this century in the ruins of Sumerian cities, offering a glimpse of ancient history that's quite startling. These records show that the Sumerians knew that the solar system included the planets Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. I didn't say Uranus.
Sorry.
Modern astronomers did not discover Pluto until 1930. The records prove that the Sumerians understood that the Earth orbits the Sun, that they knew the relative size of all 9 planets, and they knew the relative distances between the planets. Sumerian records also have corroborated the book of Genesis point by point, from the genetic/sexual interaction of the Anunnaki/fallen angels with human beings, to the Great Flood, to the dispersal of the nations at the Tower of Babel, and even documenting the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Ancient records from the Middle East and from Americas even offers evidence that at one time the sun stood still in the sky for an extended period of time, as related in the 10th chapter of the book of Joshua. The Sumerians referred to these advanced beings as the Anunnaki, which means those who from heaven to earth came, while the Hebrews referred to them as the Nephilim, which means those who were cast upon the earth. The Sumerians and other pagan civilizations worshipped these beings as gods, while the Hebrews were told by God that they were rebellious beings who were outside of God's grace and who were to be shunned at all costs. Their final end was predicted in Jeremiah 10 and 11. These gods who did not make the heavens and the earth will perish from the earth and from under the heavens. Helena Blavatsky referred to these gods, these wicked fallen angels, as the ascended masters of wisdom. Through her channelings of these beings, they convinced her of their benevolence, and they also led her to develop some very racist evolutionary ideas, promoting the notion of an Aryan race and denigrating the Jews as inferiors. This notion reached its climax through an Austrian by the name of Adolf Hitler. Dietrich Eckart was the famous occultist and German nationalist who befriended Hitler and promoted Blavatsky's book, leading Hitler into a deeper and darker occult vision. At the very end of Hitler's notorious book, Mein Kampf, Hitler closed with these words, "And I also want to reckon among Nazi heroes that man who as one of the best by words and by thoughts and finally by deeds dedicated his life to the awakening of our nation, Dietrich Eckart." Blavatsky's signature publication was a huge volume entitled The Secret Doctrine, which claimed to illuminate the true origins of mankind and our relationship with the ascended masters. At the end of Dietrich Eckart's life, as he lay dying, he offered these final words regarding his famous protege. "Follow Hitler. He will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. I have initiated him into the secret doctrine, opened his centers in vision, and given him the means to communicate with the powers. Do not mourn for me. I shall have influenced history more than any other German. Well, the Apostle Paul refers to these powers in his letter to the Ephesians as enemies of humanity. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. It is such a shock to realize that Hitler was motivated. Is it such a shock to realize that Hitler was motivated by an evil much more real and much more dangerous than simply his own deluded mind? The occultic source of Hitler's beliefs and goals have been documented in numerous literary works. Yet why is there so little mention of the spiritual side to his evil movement in our textbook? Why is this information considered irrelevant? Well, indeed, why is it considered irrelevant? I think it's the most relevant part of the whole Nazi saga.
But you dare not try to sell that to history textbooks and such, so you never see the light.
Yeah. I think I mentioned last time that one thing I was very impressed with about Anthony Sutton, and I don't remember which one of his works, but he was talking about the Nazis, and he said there was an evil spiritual element. He talked about the evil spiritual element that influenced them, and he said you really can't understand them and what they did unless you understand that the basis for their belief system was Luciferianism. He didn't use that word, but I will. And I think that's a very apropos statement. I mean, he kind of nailed it there. And he was not somebody who was prone to hyperbole. He wasn't really, he didn't try to shock people with his stuff. He was pretty matter of fact, kind of dry in a British sort of way, kind of stiff.
I'm even surprised he went there, but he's right. And the other thing I'm wondering if the intelligentsia, for how much there ever was with the Nazis, and also just the hierarchy of officers and such, if they were involved in that, but not necessarily foot soldiers and the people. And the only reason I say that is because approaching it from what was going on in Germany around the Nazi era through Peikoff's book, The Ominous Parallels, there was something else going on there. Not to the exclusion necessarily of dark spiritualism, but Peikoff thinks the whole thing, he thinks religion in itself is nothing but an opiate and vapid. So I would think that it may be that they went ahead and they approached the people in a different manner, while they themselves allowed themselves to be invested by Satan. Right.
I mean, the whole Luciferian idea, the whole Luciferian cult, was exactly that. They were cults of initiates. This wasn't for the common people, and they didn't talk about it with the common people. Okay. In fact, Hitler and Goebbels, Goering, all the or most of the upper strata of the Nazi Party tried to palm themselves off as something of Christians. Hitler talked a lot about his Catholicism, and it's kind of debatable to me as to how much of that was real, and I believe most of it was just propaganda. It is true that he was raised in the Roman Catholic Church, but doesn't necessarily mean that he followed their belief system. Although he did use them from time to time to gain power.
And let's face it too. I mean, that's kind of a suck up to the Vatican, which was going to help out Germany in whatever ways it could, both during and after the war.
Yeah. I mean, they actually put a lot of money into the coffers and got paid back with the treaties that were later done when Hitler took power. I'd like to read something also about the spiritual aspects of Nazism. It's from a website that normally I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, but I think it's good to go to the understand your enemy. You have to know what he's thinking. So I went to a website I don't recommend, 666blacksun.com, and I wanted to see what they had to say, and they were talking about a book that I was familiar with, or a writer I was familiar with, but hadn't read very much of, and they kind of went into a little bit of a spiel on him. His name was Otto Rahn, SS officer Otto Rahn, who was SS oh boy, I have trouble with these German things. Obersturmführer wrote a book titled Lucifer's Hofgesen, which is Lucifer's court servants. And this is from a newspaper article back in the 30s for the Westphalia Landeszeitung. I got that one right, I think. And it's these are tough, man.
Just keep moving. Just keep moving. Don't let them know you're worried about it. Whatever you say, that's the way it is.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And he wrote in the article, Lucifer's court servants. He spoke about a large audience, before a large audience on January 9th, 1938 at the Dietrich Eckart House, oh boy, in Dortmund, Germany. Ron set a new limit to the spirit tied to the Romans, to the belief in a life after death and the fear of hell. He rejected Yahweh and the Jewish teachings and professed Lucifer's Hofgesen, in whose name Kurt Eggers closed the evening with the following greeting. Lucifer who has been done wrong to greet you. Here's an excerpt from Lucifer Hofgesen, or Lucifer's servants, from Ron's book. There is much more light in the houses of God. There is much more light than in the houses of God, cathedrals and churches, where Lucifer neither is able nor wishes to enter, due to all the somber stained glass windows wherein are painted the Jewish prophets, apostles, and saints. The forest, that was free. So I guess Ron's going to hang out in the forest with Lucifer. I don't know what they're going to do out there, but don't think I want to be there to watch. And it's just kind of an indication of where these people are quite aware of the what should we say, the source of the power that they have, and they're definitely looking to Lucifer as a god. And it goes on to say in this article, Lucifer's servants is at least partly a genuine Nazi propaganda tract, and several passages make a good case for the worship of Lucifer. Indeed, this idea of Lucifer as a benign or divine being was familiar and congenial to the white light theosophist of the 1920s, who after all entitled one of their official German publications Lucifer. For Ron, the Grail was an emblem set up in opposition to the established church. Indeed, was a Luciferian symbol, and for this the Nazis were grateful. The eternal struggle between light and darkness, light in this case was represented by not Jesus or Jehovah, but by another spirit, the light bearer. To Ron, this entity represented the highest good. To Ron, the Nazi Reich in general and the SS in particular became servitors of an ancient pagan cult whose god was known to the medieval Christians not as Jesus, but as Lucifer. And having established that they are celebrated, as the numerous examples have proved, the marvels of the crown of Lucifer, it is permitted to believe that they had faith in the existence of a Luciferian crown of eternal life. And if we follow this thought to its logical conclusion, we will say that for them the god of love was none other than Lucifer in person. The god Amor is the god of spring, as is Apollon. Apollon brought back the light of the sun. He is the light bearer, or Lucifer, according to the Apocalypse of John. Apollo, or Apollyon, was equated with the devil, and according to the beliefs of the Roman Church, Lucifer is Satan. Well, I think he is, and I think these people are so far off base that it was obvious that they really couldn't come out in front of the German public at that time, and which was a nation that had been basically Christianized, or at least people. Most Germans were nominally Christian and had been raised in a culture that was influenced by Christianity. And if they had come out and just started talking about how they were following Lucifer, I don't think they would have gone very far with the general public, and kind of would have blown them out of the water, I think. You think that maybe perhaps, and this is a big part of Hitler's success, apparently were the students. And I'm talking about college age. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, you start to get rebellious, you start to dabble in stuff. And I found no traces that any of them were involved in such. But I wouldn't be surprised also if there wasn't an element there as well, that they kind of kept on the hush-hush, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I think it was a question bringing people into groups and initiating them into the Luciferian doctrine. They did it in different ways, and they had different levels. They had different societies which preached pretty much the same doctrine, but it was kind of like our Christian brother Ramsey, I believe William Ramsey, was on your show the other day, and he said something that was a very astute observation, and I started thinking about it. He said that, Masonry, Freemasonry, has been used as kind of the stepping stone into other occult organizations, and maybe like a training ground, kind of like the minor leagues of Satanism. And they bring guys up, or bring people up through that. And I started thinking about it and did a little research on it, and he's exactly right. In fact, the occultists themselves say that. Alice Ann Bailey, who was one of the people who inherited theosophy from
Blavatsky, right?
Blavatsky, exactly. She wrote in The Externalization of the Hierarchy, "The Masonic movement is the custodian of the law. It is home of the mysteries and the seat of initiation. It is a far more occult organization than can be realized, and it is intended to be the training school for the coming advanced occultist. In its ceremonials lies the wielding of the forces connected with the growth and life of the kingdoms of nature and the unfoldment of the divine aspects of man." Boy, that's some real highfalutin language to, I like the way these people write. Their style of writing is just so overblown. It's kind of humorous in a way.
What would you date that as being from, the 30s?
I'm not sure. Probably. Yeah, probably the 30s, 40s, somewhere along there.
I just wanted to mention something, too, which we kind of forget about.
Yeah.
Germany had not been unified for all that long a time.
That's correct.
I mean, when did that happen? Like in the 1870s or something, I would assume?
Yeah, late 1800s. And this was one of the great fears after World War I, was that the country would be broken back down into, warring factions again because of being defeated in the First World War. And there probably was some movement among the Allies to do that to them.
Actually, they got themselves that fake construct called East and West Germany. And they let that happen for a while. I don't know why. Everybody thinks that Ronnie called for the wall to come down, and it came down as if he was blowing his Jericho horn. But actually, there's also information, I don't know if Sutton touches upon it, that the trilobites went over there and basically said to Gorby, you know what? Russia's got to downsize. We're going to unify Germany's, and we're going to have two really good markets. And that's really, I think, what happened. So they've taken Germany apart, and they put it back together again, always in time for something. I don't know what this one's about. And one other thing, check this out. I'm just thinking, like, if you were born in 1850, okay, let's just say you were.
Actually, I was.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you know what I'm thinking about? If you could have lasted 95 years.
Yeah.
And I know that maybe that's a stretch, but just think about that, because in a span of time, look at all that happened. An individual would have seen the Civil War. I mean, if you had lived in the U.S., you would have seen the Civil War and 2 world wars. Would that be amazing?
Yeah.
Can you imagine all that transpired? And the reason I bring that up is that in a 90 to 100-year stretch, look at all the changes between 1850 and 1950. It'll blow. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it seems to be accelerating, too.
Yeah.
It seems to be, the events are just, I think the term's been used, a quickening. It's just sort of having its own, it's like a snowball rolling downhill, it's gaining its own momentum.
It also shows you that with the introduction of technology, as much good as it can do, you can also see the mayhem it can create. And that seems to happen as the technology gets greater. I mean, now we're talking about what we used to laugh about in Flash Gordon movies. Then you find out that it's real,
Yeah.
So there we go. Bullets? What bullets? Come on, man. That's passé.
I was going to read one other quote here about the Masons, and it's from a guy who probably should know. It's Anton LaVey, who was the head of the Satanic Church, in his book, The Satanic Rituals, Companion to the Satanic Bible. Boy, I can't wait to get a copy of that.
That one, yeah.
Satanic ritual is a blend of Gnostic, Kabbalistic, Hermetic, and Masonic elements incorporating nomenclature and vibratory words of power from virtually every mythos. Masonic orders have contained the most influential men in many governments, and virtually every occult order has many Masonic roots. Well, that kind of, make you think twice the next time you pass one of the lodges there. You just thought it was a bunch of guys in a kind of like a Kiwanis club with funny hats, and it's really not that kind of a deal.
And also too, we can spread around the manure. I had asked Liam once about this also, and that is the Rosicrucians, who seem to have had the strongest foothold, I guess, in Germany, because the chapter that's over here in the United States, not the one that's in California, but the one that's in Quakerstown, Pennsylvania, says, look, we are the real order that comes from Germany. And I often, Liam's just said that the notion that perhaps the Masons sometimes were held out as fall guys and bagmen to keep the Rosicrucians from being found out to be actually probably the heavier group. Liam says, that's got some basis in fact. So, but still, where does it come out of? Germany. The Rosicrucians. So anyway.
Yeah, and if you, I think you pointed this out last time that Martin Luther's symbol, his
the Lutheran symbol,
was a rose and a cross, and that's kind of spooky. I had never associated that with the Lutheran Church at all.
No, neither did I, and I came out of the Lutheran Church, although it was dead, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
However, we returned to one, make a long story short, that was a vestige of a lot of the Scandinavians who were my mother's cohort, who came over here and were evangelical. So there it was like, okay, great with the Lutheran liturgy and all that other stuff, but they got it, so it was nicer to be in that situation.
Yeah.
But I got a little offended by that. I'm taking a look and saying, well, listen, first, we don't know how squeaky clean Luther was.
Yeah.
I coming from a Lutheran church, you think I'm going to hear anything bad about him? No. But there's something going on there, but it just seems interesting that there's a certain center to that, it seems, in Germany, more so than, as far as I know, Great Britain or France or Italy,
Well, it's just amazing to me, and I'm not a anti-German, but it's amazing to me just how much weird, strange cults and strange ideas and just a great deal of what I would have to describe as spiritual evil has come out of that nation.
Spiritual evil.
People that are from that nation.
No, spiritual evil, a little mythology thrown in. No doubt about it. Also, I want to let you know that I had done that series of Lusitania, and there was a person in there by the name of Varick,
right,
who was trying to get somebody in the U.S. government to listen to me, please. If you send a Lusitania across, they're going to they may not sink it, but they're going to torpedo it.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this to Colvin. Colvin writes me back and says, I think Crowley was involved in that. I'm like, really?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if did I say it on air with Ramsey?
I'm not sure if you did or not, Viz, but, I've done a lot of research on the occult, and it seems like Crowley's ugly mug shows up everywhere. Anything evil that's being done, this guy shows up.
Well, Ramsey pinned it down and said, take a look at the book. He said, yes, Varick and Crowley worked together. Crowley apparently pushing himself off as a German sympathizer. To the greatest extent, okay. But obviously being a spy for Britain. So,
right.
And he was over in New York at the same time. It's amazing. You're right. He's like everywhere.
Yeah, he seems to show up and seems to have some propensity for showing up. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is that he's been tipped off to where he's supposed to show up, because I believe that he was definitely an agent of Satan. And he called himself the most evil man of the century or whatever, and he was, I think. Everything I read about him just makes me want to punch him in the mouth. It's that kind of a thing.
Well, I wonder how that goes down on a resume. But but let's face it, he got entree into a lot of places.
Exactly. He's without a doubt just a real scumbag. And on the subject of Crowley, I just picked something out I was going to talk about a little bit later, but I'm going to talk about it now.
Okay.
I know that quite a while back, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I sent you an interview with the son of L. Ron Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard Jr.
Yes.
I think you read it on the air if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And there was something here that he says. Now, L. Ron Hubbard was basically a protege of Crowley, along with Jack Parsons. And so, at any rate, I was going to read something here about the spiritual aspects of it. And in the interview, they're saying he was telling they asked him, "Did your father take a lot of drugs?" He says, "Yes, since he was 16." You see, drugs are very important in the application of heavy black magic. The personal use of drugs expands one's conscious ability to break open the doors to the realm of the deep. And then they asked, "Did he encourage you to do drugs?" "Well, he used them with me. He was a real night person. We used to sit around all night, sit around his office and get loaded and talk. He had a pretty liquid tongue. He loved to talk, and of course in the 50s, he decided that I was the heir apparent, so he wanted to teach me everything he knew. He started me out by mixing phenobarbital into my bubble gum when I was about 10 years old." Can you imagine that?
I know.
This was to induce deeper trances in order to practice the black magic and to get an avenue to power. They asked, "How exactly would this work?" The explanation is sort of long and complicated. The basic rationale is that there are some powers in the universe that are pretty strong. As an example, Hitler was involved in the same black magic and the same occult practices that my father was, the identical ones, which, as I have said, stem clear back to Egyptian times. It is a very secret thing, very powerful and very workable and very dangerous. Brainwashing is nothing compared to it. The proper term would be soul cracking. It's like cracking open the soul, which then opens various doors to the powers that exist, the satanic and demonic powers. Simply put, it's like a tunnel or an avenue or a doorway. Pulling that power into yourself through another person, and using women especially, is incredibly insidious. It makes Dr. Fu Manchu look like a kindergarten student. It's the ultimate vampirism, the ultimate mind F. Instead of going for blood, you're going for their soul, and you take drugs in order to reach that state where you can quite literally, like a psychic hammer, break their soul and pull the power through. Well, I think that kind of shows what side L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons and Crowley were all having a big time doing. And it's amazing to me that you know, these people are very popular now. The Crowley's very popular again, and you know, people talk about him and write about him, and you know, he was such a spiritual guy and so forth. And they just kind of ignored the absolute evil influence this man had.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, trying to be a little bit more egalitarian than you should. The characters, I'm going to say this, the characters that are out there right now on the internet who spend so much time, devote so much time to Crowley, look, they're from the pit of hell too, and they're going to return to it. You know, I said that's okay, which is one of the reasons I realized that to have occult people on the show when I did that during the Beyond the Gracianole era was wrong. Yeah, if
you'll remember, I was one of the people saying, I don't think you should have those guys on the show. But that was your show, none of my business, really. I just didn't like it. I remember going into the website, the guy, I forget his name, but I called him Asshole as Krampus.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And I went into his website because I'd heard him on his show, and I thought, well, maybe I should, there might be something interesting there. And I clicked onto that sucker, and I swear, I read a poem, and I believe it was a Crowley poem, and it was one of the most evil, sacrilegious hate. Just displayed tremendous hatred toward God and toward Jesus Christ.
Other people use the word disgusting.
Yeah, it was horrid. It repelled me. I guess the Holy Spirit just went, no, not going to read any more of that crap.
Well, I'll tell you,
and it was like, I'm out of there.
No, people who were not necessarily Christian or anything, just were repulsed by it. They just thought it was vile. I was unaware of it. Ignorance is no defense, but it was at that time I realized that really all that happens when this situation goes on, you can never. I mean, he wanted to debate or something like that, about God and Christ. And I'm like, look, I'll tell you right now, you're not going to change me. I'm not going to change you, and we're going to waste a lot of time. Mm-hmm. I said, so let that go. And that was the last one I ever did. After that, I realized. I said, and that whole year was a very strange year. But you're right. And hey, but what it goes back to originally, though, Larry's what I'm going to say is those who esteem Crowley right now, there's a special place for them, and they're all over the internet and very prominent as well. Yeah,
in fact, it's really amazing to me the occultic forces that are, everybody that listens to, well, I say everybody, most of the people that listen to your show are aware of the New Age movement and how the New Age movement overlaps with the Nazis and with the occultism of, down through the ages for that matter. But, it's just amazing to me, how so many people are falling into that trap. People that, these are not malevolent people. These are not people that, they would never consciously join a satanic group. They would never want to be involved in anything worshiping Satan or worshiping evil. But they get suckered into this stuff, and it's really kind of frightening because there's an awful lot of basically decent people who are, getting suckered into
right.
dallying with evil.
And now that you ask me, but one of the things that happens with them is that they want to hang on to a belief that sooner or later humankind will get it completely right and elevate itself in all manners, morally, whatever religion. And it's this, we've been through this with some people. It's like, well, I'll tell you what, it's never happened, and I don't see it really happening. But they hang in there with that. Now, the ones who are also involved in that manner, calling out the NWO, and I'll say directly, one of them is Maria Heller. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and here she is talking about channeling spirits and talking, and having necromantic conversations. And I'm like, well, what, don't you think that's part of... Yeah, I know.
That's creepy.
Yeah, call back dead people. It's great. What's even worse is that they probably do. So,
well, you're calling back something, but you're not calling back that person. The Bible tells you those
somebody
are
else is coming back. Yeah.
You're talking to a demon.
I know, it's funny. It's like,
and they're much higher intelligence than people, and they can fool people easily.
I mean, I'm making light of this, but I can almost see this like in a National Lampoon comedy movie. It's like, well, you look like him, but you sure have a deeper voice. You know what I'm saying? Oh, sorry
Your breath kind of smells bad.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a sulfur smell on your clothes.
How long have you been here? But you see, this is another backdoor to the NWO, and that's why I'm saying those who are in the New Agey thing, who are peace, love, and happiness, and that's okay. I get that. But in the end, that is still a phalanx involved in this whole New World Order movement. So
it's still it's just a beguiling form of Satanism, Luciferianism. They kind of adapt it down through the ages. They've adapted it, to sucker in the people that are not initiates, to manipulate them. That's really what secret societies are all about: is a manipulation of those who they consider the profane, the cattle, or they call them the catechumen in German, and it's just amazing that people don't get it. They don't see the parallels. But the problem is that, at least in America, I don't know about any place else necessarily, but in the United States, we are so ignorant of history and so ignorant of the main currents of history that have influenced the world. Our educational system is so poor and does such a bad job, and I think that's basically on purpose.
Oh, yeah. One other thing I think, too, and this comes from someone like Liam and also Charles up in Canada, we've only been around, the United States has, for 200 years or so, whatever.
Right.
But people in Europe, and those who came over from Europe to Canada in particular, are very well aware of how nasty things can get since, obviously, the European monarchies have been around for quite some time. Mm-hmm. They have no trouble believing how bad it can get, where we have been more or less sheltered from that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think Americans were, obviously I'm generalizing here, but Europeans, I have friends who are Europeans, and it's not that they don't. I've heard them say many times, it's not. Don't take this wrong, Larry, but I like Americans. They're good people and they're optimistic and shit. But a lot of times Americans are almost childlike. He said they don't realize how dangerous the world really is, and they don't realize, what things are like outside of the United States. And it's kind of like they consider us to be nice guys, but kind of dumb.
Well, and I'm not going to take any farther than this, but remember, having amnesia about the way the world was before there was a United States, or being ignorant of it, allows us also to believe the myth that is not generated in the Bible, but in public school systems, and this whole fairy tale about, God left His country for us, set it aside for us, and He loves us. And of course, the first question is, okay, so what happened to the native peoples?
Yeah.
So, but you know where I'm going with this? It's like we have to be sheltered because we buy this thing in that God loves us because we're so Christian, which means that we can go out and genocide and kill people, and it's okay because, God's with us.
Well, I heard somebody say once, where Hitler really made his big mistake was that he killed millions of white people. In other words, if he had come over to the United States and gone around killing the Native Americans, he would have been okay.
Yeah.
It was, kind of a silly analogy, but I think there was some truth in that. I mean, those people, the Native Americans, American Indians were just brutalized. Now some of them were pretty rough too, but by and large, it was just a series of genocidal actions were taken against them to wipe them out and take what they had.
Hey, listen, if they were brutal, here's the point. It's like saying to a European, well, if you didn't come here, we wouldn't have this problem, would we?
Right.
And people have said that the downfall of the United States is due to the loose immigration laws of the native peoples. Man, they should have all lined up on the eastern seaboard and just said, you're not landing no ships here.
Well, if they had known what was going to happen, I think they wouldn't have let them land.
Of course not.
Possible. The problem was just a technology gap as far as weapons at first. Really got them there. I know one thing that you wanted to talk about today. A person that you were interested in was Baron Rudolf von Sabotendorf, who was the head of the Thule Society, and so I prepared some stuff on that, and I'll start reading that if you like.
Are you ready to go there, really?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. First, I'm going to go into kind of an overview, and a pretty good overview of what was going on in Munich at the time that Sabotendorf and the Thule Society rose to prominence. It's from Peter Levenda, who normally I wouldn't read too much on. I think of Levenda as basically an occultist himself. I don't really have a lot of proof of that, but a little suspicious. But he is a pretty good writer and a good historian, and this is pretty well done. Mm-hmm. He goes, it's called Descent into Hell. It's from his book about the Nazis and Unholy Alliance, the Nazis and the occult. Mm-hmm. And the city is in turmoil. The Kaiser's Republic has collapsed with the defeat of Germany in the First World War, and the whole country is up for grabs. It appears as if Germany is about to fall apart into the warring city-states from which it has been assembled nearly 50 years ago. The victorious Allies are demanding enormous concessions from Germany. The Russian Revolution has been in full swing for a year, and German soldiers returning from the front are being cajoled into helping midwife the same type of communist regime amid the ashes of the Second Reich. Kurt Eisner, an intellectual and a Jew, a defender of the League of Nations, takes the initiative and proclaims a socialist republic in Munich on the 7th of November 1918. It looks as if there is going to be a communist regime in Germany, or at least a socialist one in Bavaria, after all. Hysteria grows among the nationalists, and with this despair that their nation is on the verge of realizing the dreams of Marx and Engels as codified in their famous manifesto, Germans are bewildered, shocked, stunned into a kind of nervous stupefaction. They've lost the war, their country may be broken up once again into many separate bickering pieces, and there will soon be communists calling shots in Berlin and in the capital of Bavaria, Munich. Within 48 hours, there is a meeting of the Thule Gesellschaft. The Thule, a mystical society based in part on the theosophical writings of Guido von List and Lance von Liebenfels, which is to say an amalgam of Eastern religion, theosophy, anti-Semitism, Grail romance, runic mystification, and Nordic paganism, meets every Saturday in spacious rooms at the elegant Four Seasons Hotel in Munich. There are roughly 250 members of the Thule in Munich and over 1,500 in Bavaria. On that day, November 9, a bizarre individual, an occultist, an initiate of the Eastern mysteries in Turkey, as well as of Freemasonry, and the leader and founder of the Thule, the self-styled Baron Rudolf von Sabbatendorf, makes an impassioned plea to the assembled cultists for armed resistance to the Reds. This plea eventually degenerates into a monologue on the runes, German racial theory, Nordic mythology, and other arcane lore. No matter. Most of his listeners know what to expect. They are, in fact, members of the super sect, super racist, and super occult German order Wahlvater of the Holy Grail, or Germanen order, which is using the name Thule Gesellschaft, or Thule Society, a literary cultural society, as a cover to confuse the Munich fledgling Red Army, which is on the lookout for right-wing extremists. So Bottensdorf himself is a master of the anti-Semitic Germanen order's Bavarian division under its leader and founder Hermann Pohl. The Thule cultist, whose symbol is a long dagger superimposed on a swastika, needs no encouragement. They begin stockpiling weapons in secret supply dumps in and around Munich, anticipating a counterstrike against the new socialist republic. They make alliances with other nationalist groups, and an organized resistance movement is born. All the mystical and clandestine labors of the past 20 years, involving a series of secret occult organizations with elaborate initiation ceremonies and complex magical rituals from the List societies, enter HAO, Higher Armanen Order, to the Order of the New Templars, will soon culminate in a pitched battle in the streets of Munich between the neo-pagan Thule Society and the, quote, godless communist. Well, that's kind of like an overview of who Sabbatendorf was. I know I'm kind of interested in the guy, and I go to a source that I really like to use for any kind of information on the occult in Germany, and that's Nicholas Goodrich Clark, who wrote The Occult Roots of Nazism. He's a British historian and a very good one. His writing style is very highly academic and very flowery, but he does tremendous research. And Rudolf von Sabbatendorf, Baron Rudolf von Sabbatendorf, who I like to call Rudy der Fartenpooper, is...
I knew you had to get that one in there.
Yeah, I had to. Just there's something down deep. I don't know what it is. But anyway, he says here, Sabbatendorf first became involved in German Volkisch activities at a late stage of the war, but his early life is still important. Compared to most Volkisch agitators in Imperial Germany, Sabbatendorf seems a cosmopolitan adventurer. His penchant for shady deals and espionage led him into subterfuges, which also earned him the reputation of a trickster. The son of a working-class Prussian family, Sabbatendorf made an early break with his background by going to sea and working in the Middle East. A study of his early movements enables one to understand better those experiences which fashioned his attitudes and otherwise equipped him to play his not insignificant part in the counter-revolutionary operations in Munich in 1918 and 19. The man who called himself Baron Rudolf von Sabbatendorf was, in common with the other Aristophist he admired, no more than a self-styled aristocrat. He was born on 9th of November 1875 at Hoyerswerda, a Saxon market town lying on the Lausitz Heath, northeast of Dresden, the son of Ernest Rudolf Glauer, a locomotive driver, and his wife, Christine. So we see right there that Rudy took that name. He wanted to appear to be an aristocrat, so eventually he came up with a different name. His real name was Rudolf Glauer. So he starts off kind of a phony to start with. Having failed to complete his studies, Glauer could not hope to secure a qualified post in Germany, and like many other young contemporaries, Glauer felt confined in his homeland and decided to go to sea. Arriving in Alexandria in July 1900, Glauer traveled directly to Cairo to meet Hussein Pasha, an influential Turkish landowner who was in the service of the Khedive Abbas Hilmi. According to Tiad, Glauer worked in the service of the Khedive as a technician from 1897 to 1900. According to Der Talisman der Rosenkreuz, which I think is the talisman of the Rosicrucians, Glauer spent less than a month in Cairo before traveling on to Constantinople, as Hussein Pasha spent the summers in Turkey at his house on the Asian shores of the Bosphorus. In the absence of further evidence, it seems likely that Glauer spent sufficient time in Egypt to gain some impression of its people and culture. And although still paying substantial tribute to the Ottoman Sultan, Egypt had become a prosperous country by the late 1890s under the successful Anglo-Egyptian condominium. At the end of July 1900, Glauer sailed the 1,000-mile voyage from Alexandria to Constantinople via Piraeus and Izmir. Glauer was so enchanted by the country and its customs and its gracious host that he decided to stay on. After learning Turkish from the imam of the Beykoz Mosque and familiarizing himself with the manners of the people, although through frequent trips to Istanbul, Glauer agreed to work from October 1900 for a year as a surveyor on the Anatolian estates of Hussein, near Bandırma and Yenikop, near Bursa. Besides gaining further technical and managerial experience in Turkey, Glauer began a serious study of occultism. An interest in exotic religion had already been kindled when he saw the Mevlevi sect of whirling dervishes and visited the Cheops pyramid at El Giza in July 1900. His companion, Ibrahim, had told him of the cosmological and numerological significance of the pyramids and aroused Glauser's interest and curiosity about the occult gnosis of ancient theocracies. Hussein Pasha, his wealthy and learned host, practiced a form of Sufism and discussed these matters with Glauer. At Bursa, he made the acquaintance of the Termudi family, who were Greek Jews from Salonika. Old Termudi had retired from business to devote himself to the study of the Kabbalah and collecting alchemical and Rosicrucian texts, while his eldest son, Abraham, managed their bank at Bursa, and a younger brother ran a branch establishment in Salonika. The Termudis were Freemasons in a lodge that may have been affiliated to the French Rite of Memphis, which had spread in the Levant and the Middle East. Glauer was initiated into the lodge by old Termudi and subsequently inherited his occult library. In one of these books, Glauer discovered a note from Hussein Pasha describing the secret mystical exercises of traditional Islamic alchemists, still practiced by the Baktashi sect of dervishes. When Glauer returned to Turkey in 1908, he continued to study Islamic mysticism, which in his opinion shared a common Aryan source with the Germanic runes. Well, that's kind of like a basic, a background on him, on how Sabbatendorf or Glauer got involved with the occult, and eventually he did pretty well in business. Apparently, nobody really was sure of the basis of his wealth, and he adopted the name of Sabbatendorf and von Sabbatendorf, so that Baron. Mm-hmm. He could appear to be an aristocrat, which most of the people in the feudal society were quite well off. They did have some people in it, such as Hitler and others, who were like political types who didn't have a great deal of money, but Sabbatendorf did.
Well, I was just
anyway.
No,
go ahead.
I mean, I just wanted to say that I came across him, and I just called the site up to see if it was still there, and I'm going to send you the link later on.
Sure.
But the way I came about finding out about Sabbatendorf and this connection between the Ottoman Empire and Germany, of course, before World War I, I mean, he seemed to be kind of a pivotal element in that whole thing. Because, I mean, I would not normally, I mean, in a way, growing up and such, finding out who was the Axis powers or the bad guys necessarily in World War I couldn't understand the Turkey-Germany thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do they got in common? But one of the things they're saying is that, well, without going through the whole 9 yards, what he says here is, and I had this guy on a year or so, well, back in, I think, Beyond the Grassy Knoll days.
I remember that. I remember that. You had an interview with a guy who was talking about Sabbatendorf, and it's been quite a while. Yeah,
and he was from Greece, and he had black razor. The stuff up there I'm not real comfortable with, but he still has, I don't even know if he's still involved in this, but that site's still up that dealt with this connection, and all it says here is that media influences exerted in Europe by Sambat-endorsed Masonic groups, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, and others sworn to secrecy in the 1920s, serve as an indication that parts of Asia Minor and Middle East may have been the prototype Aryan headquarters of anti-Semitism before Hitler publicly appeared in Germany. Anatolia's well-known policy of disregarding human rights and her embarrassing support from Ottoman Freemasons contributed to the Third Reich's blueprint for genocide and its reckless resistance to Western Judeo-Christian principles.
Oh, I would definitely think that's true.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He was probably the world. He even made Hitler look tame as far as anti-Semitism. In fact, he was a friend of Hitler's and spent quite a bit of time in Berlin in the years just before the Second World War and during the Second World War. He had several audiences with Hitler, and Hitler supplied him with money and materials and weaponry in his quest to rout the Jews out of the Holy Land. And one reason that the Arabs were such good friends with the Germans is because they had two common enemies, which were the British and the Jews. And as a matter of fact, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was the head of a Waffen-SS unit, which was composed of Bosnian Muslims during World War II, and they were the basis for the fascist group there in Bosnia today.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's stuff on the web, as you probably know, where you can see the history of what actually came to a head during Milosevic's days. All those animosities, I guess, and flat-out hatreds were kind of resurrected.
Oh, yeah.
When Yugoslavia was actually returned almost to the way it looked before World War I. And I believe, is it the Croats that were heavily pitched against the Serbians and vice versa? Because
right, the Croats were Roman Catholic, and the Serbians were Orthodox. And there was no love lost between those two groups. In fact, the accounts that I've read of the concentration camps that the Croats ran, the accounts that I've read said that the Germans themselves, the SS, were even disgusted by the brutality of the Croats, and basically their idea about it, all about getting rid of the Jews and their other enemies, was do it quickly and get it out of the way. Just get rid of them quick.
Do it, yeah.
And the Croats, I mean, they took delight in like sawing people's necks with, crosscut saws and beating people to death with hammers, and I mean, just awful stuff. Cutting people's organs out while they were alive, just abject, disgusting brutality. And this was all known about. The Roman Catholic Church knew about it. There's no question, and did nothing about it, and more or less gave tacit permission to do it.
That's why Serbia's Air Force wanted to go and bomb the Vatican, but they couldn't do it because it was cloud cover that day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they would have if they could have. No doubt about it. That would have been strange.
Well, the story is, of course, they said, well, leave that to God; He'll take care of it. So they never did do it. So
yeah.
But those factions in 1991, I guess that was. When things started to heat up, and we got involved in it, of course, with Kosovo and all that.
Right.
A lot of that's reemerged. That's a history that goes back quite some time, and of course, we here in North America aren't all that aware of it, but a lot of bad blood got loosed when the communists left town. Well,
there's a lot of speculation that really the whole war in that area of the world was, just basically a payback from World War II. Really what between the factions there. And also that, the Germans were behind it, and as far as the European powers. So that's another subject, though, I couldn't even really get involved in that right
now.
now.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and talk some more about the Thule Society if you want.
Sure.
Okay. There's quite a bit of information about the Thule Society. Some of it quite lurid.
Yeah.
But basically, I've tried to pick up some stuff that seemed reasonable and from relatively legitimate historians. And there's one book that's pretty good. There's some controversy about it being accurate or not, but I think it probably is. It's called A Spear of Destiny by Trevor Ravenscroft, who is a British historian. And he wrote that about the practices and beliefs of the Thule Society. He said they were Satanists who practiced black magic. This means that they were solely concerned with raising their consciousness by means of rituals to awareness of evil and non-human intelligences in the universe, and with achieving means of communications with these intelligences. He also goes on to say, Thule members practiced a form of sexual magic derived from a lodge of which Aleister Crowley was a member. Crowley was recognized as the foremost worshiper of Satan in the 19th century. The origin of this medieval magic can be traced to a Freemason, Robert Little, who founded the Societas Rosicruciana in 1865. Again, the Rosicrucians show up. And Ravenscroft says, while the actual sexual perversions which were practiced are too offensive to share, the results are not. Indulgence in the most sadistic rituals, awakening penetrating vision into the working of evil intelligences, and bestowed phenomenal magical powers. And Ravenscroft goes on to say the effects on Hitler were the sexual perversion took a central place in Hitler's life. A monstrous sexual perversion was the very core of his existence, the source of his mediumistic and clairvoyant powers, and the motivation behind every act through which he reaped a sadistic vengeance on humanity. He says that Eckhart was the one who initiated Hitler into a monstrous sadistic magic ritual, after which he was sexually impotent. Hitler's impotency had a deep psychological foundation. He knew sexual fulfillments through the extremes of sadism and masochism. This impotency delivered a final devastating blow to Hitler's psychological foundation, finally making him into the sadistic murderer that history knows. Hey, I'll buy that.
I wonder what Eva was thinking, but anyway.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Maybe she had a riding crop or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah. She also might have a shotgun to her head. But...
Who the heck knows? But this brings up a subject that's kind of very apropos, is the sex rituals and sexuality is involved with the occult. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read a few things about that.
Go for it.
This is again from Goodrick Clark. Occultism has its basis in religious way of thinking, the roots of which stretch back into antiquity. Its principal ingredients have been identified as Gnosticism, the Hermetic treatises on alchemy and magic rooted in Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and the Kabbalah. Gnosticism probably refers to the beliefs of a certain heretical sects among the early Christians that claimed to possess gnosis, or special esoteric knowledge of spiritual matters. The Gnostic sects disappeared in the 4th century, but their ideas inspired the dualistic Manichaean religion of the 2nd century. Since occultism is associated primarily with Gnosticism, the association of the Gnostics with homosexuality is of primary relevance to this study. Thus, we found an obscure reference to Hitler as a Manichaean. This is from two guys that wrote this article, and gosh, I'm trying to find their names. Oh well, no matter. Anyway, I'll give you the reference on that later. But
okay.
They are talking about Stephen Cass's The Holocaust in Historical Contents. Mani, for whom Manichaeism is named, was a 3rd century prince of Babylon who devised his own form of Gnosticism. Gnostics blended pagan sex rituals and mother goddess worship with elements of New Testament Christianity, and rejected Jehovah God as an evil demon. Manichaeism imposed on Gnosticism a caste system of leaders and followers, A Manichaean sect called the Bogomils, later called the Cathars, arose in Bulgaria and spread across Europe. Homosexuality became so closely associated with these Bulgarian heretics that the practice became known as buggery. Indeed, the word for Cathar in most European languages came to be the word for homosexual. In German, it's Ketzer, in Italian, Gazzaro, and in French, Hérité. Heresy and homosexuality became so interchangeable that those accused of heresy attempted to prove their innocence by claiming heterosexuality. And I read that to go into a discussion of Guido von List, who was one of the big influences on the Thule Society. And I was just going to say, if you've ever seen a picture of Guido von List, if you ever go on the internet and look up a photograph of Guido von List, he kind of looks like Gabby Hayes with a beret and a pair of wire rim glasses, and has kind of the stare of Charlie Manson. I'm not trying to say that Guido was a whack job, but he was he was a little strange, just a little strange. At any rate.
Yeah, you get all the basic food groups there.
But I was going to say also that I think Guido's problems stem from he spent an awful lot of his time around other men, and I think part of his problem, in the immortal words of Andy Griffith playing the character Will Stockdale in the movie No Time for Sergeants, "Sir, if you don't mind me saying so, I don't believe a fellow your age would be so confused about it all if he ever got out and saw some girls." But anyway, Guido von List was the first to combine German nationalism with the occult teachings of theosophy. This is Goodrich Clark again. A bitter critic of Christianity, especially Catholicism, List had converted to Wotanism, a worship of Wotan, the ancient German god of storms, as a young teenager. Well, that's weird. Years later, List became a cult figure on the eastern edge of the German world. He was regarded by his readers and followers as a bearded old patriarch and a mystical nationalist guru whose clairvoyant gaze had lifted the glorious Aryan and German past of Austria into full view from beneath the debris of foreign influences and Christian culture. Although twice married, List was also certainly homosexual. His associates included George Lance von Liebenfels and Harold Gravel, both homosexual occultists. Gravel was a leading theosophist in Germany and also contributed to the pederast journal Der Eigen. In 1908, List formed the Guido von List Society in part to promote his Ariosophist research and writings, which by this time had become viciously anti-Semitic. List was also involved in Hindu Tantrism. This is Clark again. A form of sexual magic, black magic, that incorporated deviant sexual rituals. As described in Cavendish's Man, Myth, and Magic, Tantrism is a religion in which there are a number of rites which are regarded as essential: group sexuality, adultery, incest, and in the higher planes, intercourse with demons. Perfection is gained by satisfying all of one's desires. Now, the reason I brought that up about List as well was that we were talking earlier about the influence from Tibet, and Tibetan Buddhism, as well as Hindu Tantrism. Tibetan Buddhism uses tantric sex magic, and it all stems back to what we were talking about earlier with L. Ron Hubbard's son. L. Ron Hubbard Jr. was talking about the sexual rituals that they were using to gain power. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that the sexual perversion and the use and abuse of other people sexually seems to go hand in hand with this type of satanic cult activity.
Yeah.
It goes even farther than that. I'll discuss some other people involved with this. In 1911, List formed an elitist occult organization called the Higher Armanian Order. The HAO was a hierarchical priesthood in which he was the Grand Master. Well, why not? List claimed this cult was a surviving remnant of an ancient order of priest kings called the Armanienschaft. This group was the source of List's greatest influence on the Nazis. List's blueprint for a new German empire based upon a revival of the Armanienschaft was detailed and unambiguous. It called for the ruthless subjection of non-Aryans to Aryan masters in a highly structured hierarchical state. The qualification of candidates for positions in the new social order rested solely on their racial purity. The list went further still, anticipating the mystical elitism of the SS in Nazi Germany. List's ideal was a male order with an occult chapter. And although the MS was never a large organization, its membership included high-ranking members of Austrian society. One individual in particular would turn out to be very important to the rise of Nazism, Adolf Hitler himself. After the fall of the Third Reich, a book written by Guido von List was found in Hitler's private library. On the inside cover was written the inscription, "To Adolf Hitler, my dear brother and our Manin," although this is insufficient evidence to conclude that Hitler belonged to the group. Then it goes on to talk about George van Liebenfels. It said, if any occultist can be said to have had more influence on Hitler and the Nazis and List, it would be George Lance von Liebenfels. Lance was a former Cistercian monk who had been thrown out of the order for, quote, carnal and worldly desires. Since the Cistercian order was a closed all-male monastery, it is assumed that Lance's indiscretions were of a homosexual nature. It was through Lance that Hitler would learn that many of his heroes in history were also practicing homosexuals. After being expelled from the monastery, Lance formed his own occultic order called the Ordo Novi Templi, or the Order of the New Temple.
There you go.
The ONT was related to the Ordo Templi Orientis, or Order of the Temple of the East, which, like List organization, practiced tantric sexual rituals. Sounds like we've kind of exhausted that subject.
Yeah, I'm not going to...
I had a point in doing it, and I realized I've gone a little far there. But anyway, don't want to get into anything embarrassing there. But.
Well, you know, it brings back memories of the movie Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you know, that movie and Angel Heart and stuff, I mean, it's real, it goes on, and it just, I don't know, it's about as debased as it gets. So, right. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's out there. And
well, the thing about Eyes Wide Shut, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, and hey, look, I mean, even the times when I've had Dr. Lachter on, if you remember Ellen Lachter from out in San Diego.
Yeah.
I mean, man, some of the stuff we don't even talk about on air. It defies any reasonable human being trying to understand that.
Yeah, you know, it's whether heterosexual or homosexual, there's a great deal of sexual ritual that is involved with these cults. And the thing about Eyes Wide Shut, that when I first saw it, you know, it didn't dawn on me what the writer was trying to portray. I mean, I was like, wow, this is weird. You know, the guy goes in and sees the, I don't know what you'd call him, high priest or whatever, with that censer, you know, with the incense in it, and that weird music, which apparently was from some chant in a monastery that they had recorded. And obviously these women were being used sexually, and I thought, well, at first it just didn't dawn on me. I thought, well, you know, these are very wealthy elitists, you know, and they're having an orgy, you know. But it was much deeper than that. These people were trying to gain power. You know, these were extremely wealthy, powerful individuals to start with, and you began to see that when you peel the curtain back, this was the kind of activity that they were involved in. The use and abuse of others sexually, one of the main tenets of their belief system.
You know, and it still goes on now. It is probably the most hideous, dirty secret that nobody talks about in the United States.
Right.
But I mean, it goes on everywhere. There's no doubt about it. And then, you know, I won't go running with this, but I'm sorry, I still go back to thinking is how in the world they could never find out what happened to John Benet Ramsey.
Yeah.
And I'm not casting aspersions about the parents or anything, but it's like, you know, it was a young child, blah, 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 you know, around the Saturnalia feast.
Right.
You know, and who knows where all the milk carton children have gone. You know, I mean, they just don't all disappear. Something happens to them to make them never come out, you know, around again. So,
yeah. Well, it's interesting that you made that statement, because I was going to read about another one of the secret societies of that time, which was the Brill Society.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what historian Michael Fitzgerald says about the Brill Society, which was related to the Thule Society. In fact, some of the members of the Brill were in the Thule Society. And I'll talk about the origins of it. First, Peter Moon, who wrote a book called The Black Sun. The Brill Society began around the same time as the Thule Society, when Karl Haushofer founded the Bruder de Lix, which means Brothers of the Light. This organization is sometimes referred to as the Luminous Lodge. This group was eventually renamed to be the Brill Gesellschaft, as it rose in prominence and united three major societies: the Lords of the Black Stone, having emerged from the Teutonic Order in 1917, the Black Knights of the Thule Society, and the Black Sun, later identified as the elite of Heinrich Himmler's SS. Whereas the Thule Society ended up focusing primarily upon materialistic and political agendas, the Brill Society put its attention on the other side. The Brill force, or Brill energy, was said to be derived from the Black Sun, a big ball of prima material which supposedly exists in the center of the Earth, giving light to the Brillia and putting out radiation in the form of Brill. The Brill Society believed that Aryans were the actual biological ancestors of the Black Sun. This force was known to the ancient under many names and has been called Chi, Ohas, Brill, Astrolite, Odin forces, and Orgon. In a discussion of the 28th degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry called Knight of the Sun, or Prince Ada, Albert Pike said, there is in nature one most powerful force, by means whereof a single man who could possess himself of it and should know how to direct it could revolutionize and change the face of the world. Now, the weird part about the Brill, there's lots of weird parts, but probably the weirdest part about the Brill Society is that it was based largely on a book, a novel, I should say, by Sir Edward Bulwer Lytton, who was a British writer, and a Rosicrucian. And it was called Brill, The Power of the Coming Race. In a book called Morning of the Magicians by Jacques Bergier and Louis Paulwells, there's an account by Dr. Willy Ley, who was a scientist who fled Germany in 1933 because he just didn't agree with the Nazis and didn't want to be there with them in charge. And Dr. Ley said that the Brill Society, which formed shortly before the Nazis came to power, believed they had secret knowledge that would enable them to change their race and become equal to the men hidden in the bowels of the earth. Methods of concentration, a whole system of internal gymnastics by which they would be transformed. And in the book, in Unknown Hitler by Wolf Schwarzwälder, he says, in Berlin, Haushofer had founded the Luminous Lodge, or Brill Society. The lodge's objective was to explore the origins of the Aryan race and to perform exercises in concentration to awaken the forces of Brill. Haushofer was a student of the Russian magician and metaphysician George Gurdjieff. Both Gurdjieff and Haushofer maintained that they had contacts with secret Tibetan lodges that possessed the secret of the Superman. The lodge included Hitler, Alfred Rosenberg, Himmler, Goering, and Hitler's subsequent personal physician, Dr. Morell. It's also known that Aleister Crowley and Gurdjieff sought contact with Hitler. Hitler's unusual powers of suggestion become more understandable if one keeps in mind that he had access to the secret psychological techniques of Gurdjieff, which in turn were based on the teaching of the Sufis and the Tibetan Lamas, and familiarized him with the Zen teaching of the Japanese Society of the Green Dragon. Again, that this whole thing was kind of kicked off or based upon the idea of this novel, Brill, The Power of the Coming Race. And I said all that to get to this part about, we were talking about satanic sexual abuse. And Michael Fitzgerald, the British historian, says the Brill Society was dedicated to evil. Through their control of the Nazi Party, they committed the greatest acts of evil in the 20th century, and that's going some. He says, the Brill Society was noted for its use of orgies to summon up occult energy and to father a master race of children to repopulate a devastated Germany. It is said that women in such orgies would become possessed by spirits and begin speaking in tongues, and their prophecies were treated with deadly seriousness. But the darkest side of the Vril was their propensity for sacrificing young children, says Michael Fitzgerald, author of The Stormtroopers of Satan. They would stab them in the chest and cut their throats. At the height of their power in 1920s Munich, hundreds of children disappeared. Many are presumed to have been killed by the cult to summon up Vril energy. This may seem like an outlandish claim, but when you consider what these people went on to do in the Third Reich, it seems almost tame. Central to the Vril Society was the search for a German Messiah who would lead the Aryans to world domination and exterminate all other races, especially the Jews. And his rise was predicted by a spirit calling itself, and get this, the Beast of the Book of Revelation. In a seance attended by the cult followers Alfred Rosenberg and Dietrich Eckart, the Beast is said to have proclaimed that a man named Hitler would seize the Spear of Destiny and lead the Aryans to power. And within a few weeks, a fiery young man of shabby appearance began attending Thule Society meetings. His name was Adolf Hitler. The society was quick to spot Hitler's potential and exploit his astonishing personal magnetism. He could transform crowds into hysterical worshippers and mesmerize even the strongest of men. Power seemed to course through him, with waves of emotion whipping up around him in a frenzy. At times he seemed possessed. And he goes on to say, it was in the Thule Society that Hitler met those who would help him take over Germany and wage the Second World War. Rudolf Hess, Heinrich Himmler, Martin Bormann, Dietrich Eckart, Alfred Rosenberg, and Hermann Goering were all said to be members. It was these, along with Hitler, who used the Thule Society and its inner sect, the Vril Society, to launch and promote the Nazi Party. But even among this sinister group, there was an inner core who were even more evil, if that's conceivable. Bormann was an avowed Satanist, says Fitzgerald. Bormann, together with Rosenberg and Himmler, wanted to destroy Christianity and replace it with a truly occult religion of their own making. And along with the Thule Society, they created a political party that would try and do just that. I think that kind of sums up what Nazism really was all about. Its inner core, and that's Satanism.
You know, you think about the Thule Society, the Vril Society, and then you got something that spun off to become Skull and Bones here. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many societies do you need? Like, what is going on? I mean, is there a hierarchy where, like, that the best and the brightest are in the Vril and then somebody else is in the Thule? But, still in all, I mean, what is the point of all this? And yet, obviously, it found a home there. And I haven't really given all that much to reading Hitler's speeches. I mean, you watch him deliver them, and that's pretty mesmerizing, I must say. But then again, you have this in a setting where everybody's getting freaked out anyway because of, obviously, the gigantic proportions of everything that's there. And we've all seen the stadiums and the flags and all that. Mm-hmm. But I wonder really if he did in fact write his own stuff, which I probably think he didn't. Was there really anything there of substance, or was it just the old, Kazinga stuff, Because
I think I've read some of his speeches, and I've seen, subtitled, film of his speeches. Mm-hmm. And he really doesn't say anything that's that much different from what a lot of the other political figures on the right in Germany were saying, He really doesn't say anything all that remarkable. What it is he's like a medium, and there's a power and a the man was demonically possessed. I mean, I have no doubt of that. Can I prove it? No. But many people that knew him believed that, and things that he said to them, indicated that. For example, Hermann Rauschning, and I've got a quote here from Rauschning, who was a friend of his and compiled his speeches, said, "One cannot help thinking of Hitler as of a medium. The medium is possessed. Without any doubt, Hitler was possessed of forces which were beyond him, and of which the individual called Hitler was only the temporary instrument." That's exactly what I think. He was very much in league with the dark powers.
Yeah, and it seems to me that taking it from the other end, with Peikoff and what he was saying about the mindset in the country at that time. I'm still not grasped it completely, because I try to put myself in a situation where I would be listening to this stuff. I mean, maybe it's happening in the West right now. We don't even know it. I don't think we've reached that point yet. I believe we will. But it has to depend. I mean, it made it seem like people were being more or less prepared, instructed, whatever, manipulated with this thing about forget reason, act. Forget doing, forget thinking, act.
Right.
And that seemed to be which was sweeping up, especially the younger people in university. I just got done with it, part 10 or 11, where it talks about the bloodshed on the campuses. I mean, it's crazy. It makes Clockwork Orange look like a kindergarten tale.
Right.
So I mean, but that was that was a real thing. I mean, you wonder if that was a one-time only situation where the synergy involved with that, and a bad one at that, can ever be replicated, or if we'll see it happen here. The reason why you and I and many say, we become our enemy, or we've been invested by the dark side from Germany, and that's because in a lot of ways, Larry, that Nazi scientists came over here.
Exactly.
Other main figures came over here, probably got involved with the restructuring of the OSS into the CIA.
Exactly.
So we know that. But the thing is now, something has to happen in this country to the hearts and the souls of people if they're going to embrace a message that will set us off as, those who came out of the Weimar Republic were, sent off into Nazism. I don't know if we're there yet, and I don't know how long it takes. I mean, you take a look at Amos Parallels for an anatomy of that. I guess you're looking at, well, let's put it this way. It could not have been the ones who fought World War I. So whatever took hold had to be, I guess, those, to a certain extent, that were born, I'm guessing that were born probably during the
World War II were born in the late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, they were born during World War I. They really don't have any remembrance of it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, they were babies.
Right. So you've got just a whole change of the guard there, and something, obviously quite a bit more malevolent than whatever rallied Germany to fight in World War I.
Well, when you think about it, a lot of these guys were raised the majority of their life under Hitler and the Nazis, and with ideas similar to Hitler and the Nazis, which were common in German culture, starting really in the late teens and into the 20s. So all their lives they had been kind of immersed in all this Nazi-like propaganda, and of course the events after World War I, in which Germany was just in such bad shape, especially economically, and people were just desperate for a strong man to show up to show them the way out of the mess. I remember either reading or hearing on a film about they were interviewing the man in the street in Germany at one time, and this one guy says, "Look, I would have voted for the devil himself if he had promised me a job." Well, I think he did, and that's Hitler had a program, to put people back to work. He did basically the same thing that Mussolini did earlier, and then the same thing as Roosevelt did with the New Deal. The make work projects. Taking in taxpayers' money and putting it into government programs to put people back to work. That's what Hitler did. The Autobahn, which is quite an achievement, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That was a project that the Nazis put together, and it employed a whole lot of people, put a lot of people back to work, and it did two good things for them. It enabled the transportation system to be better. Trucks and cars could get around much easier, and of course that helps the economy. But it also enabled them to have a really nice highway to run their trucks and other vehicles when they decided to go to war.
The one thing I find that's a little scary about what's happening here, which Peikoff Chronicle took place over in Germany. And here's the other thing too. I think you'll remember this. I don't want to go too far afield as we bring this to a close, but You remember when Charlotte Iserbyt was on, or you've been to Charlotte's site? I mean, you know what she's about, right?
Yeah, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to her, but I got the gist of it was her crusade, if you could call it that, was to bring the public's attention to the educational system and how it's being maneuvered.
Sure, and it's interesting because in Ominous Parallels, they talk about one. I guess you could call them think tanks. They didn't call them that then. Yeah. They were schools of this or they were schools of that. One was the Frankfurt School that's mentioned by Peikoff. But Charlotte traced back where a lot of America's now current methodology and ideology educationally came from the Wundt School of experimental education or whatever in Germany. And so who goes over there? But I believe Dewey was over there and a couple of others.
Oh, yeah.
And then they come back and they set up housekeeping in where else but the Rockefeller University of Chicago.
Right.
And out of that comes, now here's where I'm going with this, the link between both people's philosophy was of collectivism.
Oh, yeah.
That's what Charlotte beat the drum for, and you can see it happening. I mean, and I know this is, people may think it's crazy. Fine, I don't. Before I even knew what was going on, something made me rear up about the whole idea of the Survivor shows that came about probably in around 2000, 99 or 2000.
I know exactly where you're going.
Okay. And ever since then, it's like, people get eliminated from the show. They come on like...
Yeah, social Darwinism.
Yeah, and it's like, well, and also you have no worth except that which you can contribute to the group.
You as an individual are nothing.
Nothing.
The whole, the collective is all that's important.
And so why wouldn't people do anything to support the collective? Because one, there seems to be safety and somewhat of an anonymity in numbers, and you like that. And of course that gives rise to what Ibsen said through his character Dr. Stockman in Enemy of the People. The majority is never right.
Exactly.
And in the end he says, he goes, who do you think numbers among the most? I forget what he said, maybe I have it here. I don't know. I'm keeping this handy these days. No, I don't have it here. He said, who numbers like among the most? The wise people or the fools?
Exactly.
There you go. And it's really got nothing to do with IQ. It's got to do with being, I think, honest with oneself and what's going on, and having common sense and critically analyzing things. That latter element, I'm pretty sure you would agree, is not really something that's embraced by the generations of young people that have followed us.
Oh, yeah. This is just a personal observation.
Sure.
It doesn't mean very much, just generalizing. But I've noticed there is it may just be because they're young, but there's kind of a meanness about a lot of younger people nowadays. And by that I mean, especially toward the elderly and people who are handicapped, etc. Just kind of a meanness, a lack of sympathy for that. And I'm not saying that's everybody. I'm not getting down on all the young people, but
no, and we're all for it.
It's a societal thing. It's a cultural thing that's being foisted off on us. And I think you're right. These shows which promote a form of survival of the fittest, social Darwinism, which was very much a part of the Nazi agenda, and really when you get down to it, like I always say, all the Nazis weren't in Germany, and the cults that influenced Hitler and the Nazis and were really the spiritual basis for their regimes, they had their own counterpart in America and in Great Britain. And here in this country, it was really the same. They call it the Order. Skull and Bone Society, they call themselves the Order. Well, that all came from a German secret society, of the same name, which was, I believe, in a Berlin university in the 1830s, and the guy who started the Skull and Bone Society at Yale, which is not just a fraternity, it is a cult, and the basis for the financial recovery of Germany, and the basis for the rise of the Nazi Party was from two main individuals. And I think we discussed this before, and they're both skull and bones people. It was Averill Harriman and Prescott Bush.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And when you think about it, we like to think that in this country, it couldn't happen here. Well, explain to me, if it can't happen here, why is it that the son and the grandson of the main financier of the Nazi Party have been presidents of the United States, and Shrub just left office? I mean, explain that. If we haven't become, or if we aren't the thing that we supposedly hated, then how did that happen?
By the way, I had to do this. I was assigned this.
Okay.
No, by American Free Press.
Okay.
About what's going on with the Republican parties. And the one thing I had said that Victor always got a kick out of, because he thought I was nuts when I said this. I mean, not nuts, but he just said, "Oh, no way." I'm like, believe me, I sat under this guy as a resident of Florida. Jeb is out there still. Mm-hmm. The point being that, and you know how this goes also, with the way people are propagandized, they can forget real quick, or they can recall something fonder than it really was.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm not listening to Rush and stuff like that like I used to before the election, because I can just stomach so much of that stuff. But what I'm seeing now is this throwback, this wonderful warm fuzzy feeling about not only Reagan, but about the Bushes. And right. I'm wondering if this is making straight the path for Jeb. Now, here's the thing about Jeb. I know, yeah, he was a governor. He did a pretty good job down here as all that stuff goes. But, when you take a look at the PNAC website, which we kind of looked at when they came out with that white paper with rebuilding America's defenses and all this stuff.
I haven't been to that website in an awful long time.
Neither have I. You're absolutely right. Neither have I. But that paper came out right before 9/11.
Right.
However, when you look at the statement of principles that was written in 1997, well, who pops up on the first line of signatories with Bennett, Gary Bauer, and Elliott Abrams? But who's up there? But Jeb Bush. And it's like, Jeb, you weren't even a governor then.
Yeah.
So you see my point? There's something that's being laid in there. He keeps going, pshaw, no, I'm not going to really run. And actually, I got to be honest with you, Larry. I mean, of the three of them, older brother and dad.
He's the smartest. Jeb is the smartest one of all.
And I said he speaks almost reminiscent in a Clinton-esque way without the wink. You know what I mean? Jeb doesn't get into that kind of stuff. But be ready for him. He was in the oil industry. He was in the banking industry. And now as the Republicans are looking around for some kind of conservative and they don't know what they're going to do, you got the No Labels Party that's trying to pop up as an independent. You got the Tea Party maybe breaking away. You got the GOP mainstream. And all I was saying, because I don't believe in this stuff at all. But my point was, in the realm of politics, if you folks want to bring down Obama, it's got to be a straight up two-way race.
Yeah.
If you get involved with a third party, forget about it. And I'm saying, who could they not align behind a Jeb Bush? Because now the Bushes are being thought of like, oh, remember the days of Shrub? How great were they? And of course,
yeah, I remember all the days of Shrub, because living here in Texas, I remember when he was governor of the state of Texas and living in Austin. He was my neighbor.
I don't know who I feel sorry more for, him or you.
To be honest with you, back then, it just never occurred to me. Obviously I was aware of his dad being president, having been president and all that, but, Shrub was governor during the latter part of the Clinton years, and it just never dawned on me that the Republicans would run him, because he was such a klutz and just basically a joke. I mean, it was obvious his daddy and Karl Rove had put him into office here in Texas, and I just never saw him do anything. The only thing I could think of that he did that was, significant was that he upped the rate of executions. I mean, he was whopping people on death row right and left. And he never gave anybody, clemency except one guy. Anybody that was famous, he didn't let him off the hook except one guy, and that was probably the worst mass murderer in the history of the state of Texas and maybe in America. That was Henry Lee Lucas.
Henry Lee, yep.
Yeah, figure that out. I mean, he was getting people, not that I have a lot of sympathy for vicious criminals that will rape and murder and, I have no sympathy for that at all. In fact, I believe in the death penalty in certain cases, but why, if you're going to let all these other people off, I mean, if you're going to zap these other people, why didn't he get Henry Lee Lucas? And the only thing I could think of is Henry Lee Lucas may very well have had connections to some kind of an MK Ultra type program, because Lucas claimed that he had been experimented upon by the government, and that he had that there were that he was involved with satanic cults that were doing kidnappings, etc., down on just below the Mexican border. And there's a lot of evidence of that. In fact, when you talk to Dave McGowan, I know you're probably going to talk to him soon.
Yeah, I'm going to try to. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Ask him about an article that he wrote about Henry Lee Lucas around the year 2000. He wrote an excellent article about that, and that was long before Shrub had gotten elected. But he had some really good
insights.
Yeah, it just seemed awfully strange, and when I started thinking, I read that article years ago, and I thought about it. I read it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought, well, this guy has some great insight, because I kind of, I got interested in McGowan because of his series on Laurel Canyon.
Everybody
the whole
loves that.
thing.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he's funny. He's really a good writer.
He is.
Really humorous. I wish I had that gift of humor that he has. Most of mine is Rudy DeParton-Pooper type stuff. But
it's in your basic gutter area.
But at any rate, he does have a genuine comic, and he writes about some of the most dark subjects, and to be able to keep a sense of humor there, that's saying a lot. But at any rate, I guess to make a long story short, I thought Shrub was a total fool. I thought of his dad as being an intelligent guy, very cagey. I always thought of the Bush family as being kind of a bunch of evil aristocrats, but
well, you weren't wrong.
Yeah, I wasn't wrong on that count.
Don't apologize.
But I just couldn't see Shrub running. But if they could put Shrub in there, I would imagine it wouldn't be that tough for him to put Jeb in there, because he's considerably smarter.
I almost sometimes think, that with older brother, I wonder if they just had to do that. They had to get him in there. Maybe it is going to go to Jeb now, and that's the real point. But I think they had to do that. And sometimes, he actually might have been, if you went to like high school with him or something like that, mm-hmm. He probably was a lot of fun to be around. I'm sure he was a wise guy.
Yeah.
But I also think he probably let that out a certain amount of times, and it became a liability of sorts. You know.
Well, he was a drunk. I mean, he was a drunk, and he did a lot of coke.
Well, yeah. I don't want anybody to forget the fact that this is a guy that choked on a pretzel and passed out, and his dogs licked him back to resuscitation.
Yeah.
I mean,
I remember one time here in Austin, I think he was riding a bicycle or something and fell and busted his face. And another time, he almost got run over by a truck while he was out jogging while he was governor. And I mean, he just had malapropisms all the time. He would just say something that was totally inappropriate or trip over his words, and just not the sharpest tool in the shed.
No, I think they just propped him up because he was in the bloodline and no one was going to touch him. But I think he pushed it.
And they got rid of people that either discredited him or even probably killed some people that were trying to stand in his way getting elected. I forget the name of the guy that wrote an expose of him and his exploits as a young man, and it's called Fortunate Son.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, the name of the book is Fortunate Son, and the guy that wrote it, they at first discredited him because he had a record. I think he had maybe gone to prison or something, but I mean, it really didn't have anything to do with the fact that he wrote the book about Shrub, and the things that he said were true.
If you want,
then he all of a sudden commits suicide, even though nobody could figure out why, because he seemed to be happy, And
I was going to say, if you're going to write about a criminal. If you're going to write about a criminal, it's best to go into prison So you know what they're like. But two things real quick. One of the weirdest things in America society is the amount of serial killers whose middle name is Lee.
Right.
You check it out.
What is that?
That is bizarre.
Lee Harvey Oswald, Henry Lee Lucas. What's this last guy? Loeffner? When he something Lee?
We'll find out.
Yeah.
But if you go in a search engine, you'll. I mean, it's amazing. The other thing is too. Remember, also Florida was one of those states like Texas. I mean, we old Sparky up in Stark, Florida.
Oh yeah. Crank it up and blast them, you know.
So I mean, you know, it goes on here as well. Plus, there's an accusation that Jeb allowed a Colombian drug dealer to just get disappeared out of the Bureau of Prisons.
Right.
And then there's that whole story about how that ties in with Chandra Levy, but that's another whole thing.
Well, you know about back during the days, you know about Mena, Arkansas, and the Clintons and the Bushes little deal there, you know, with all the drug traffic. Well, they claim that both Jeb and Shrub were involved with a drug deal where they were caught with cocaine, quite a large amount of cocaine on a private jet, and that all got covered up. I was watching a documentary on that. You know, it's amazing, Mena, Arkansas, and all that went on there, and there was really hardly any coverage of that in the mainstream media.
Well, no, but I mean, then if
you just don't even see that word, Mena. You know, they cover that up.
When you watch the documentary, the Clinton Chronicles,
yeah,
I mean, how many Arkansas Bureau of Investigation agents were talking about his shenanigans? I mean, this is in the case of Clinton, and that nothing stuck to him.
Oh yeah,
you know, I mean, so that's just the way it goes. So,
well, you know, I was thinking about in that. You're familiar with that incident where those two kids apparently saw a drug drop.
Yeah, they wound up dead on the tracks.
Yeah, and they wound up, you know, going to sleep on the railroad tracks and got run. Give me a break. You know, when they started investigating, it was obvious that you know, the Arkansas law enforcement people were involved in killing them. You know, along with probably the feds. And it just the corruption, the level of corruption of these people. And they're being held up to us, you know, as our leaders and the pillars of society.
Get ready, because we're coming to a presidential election in about 20 months or so.
Right.
And
well, you know, when they broke into the Skull and Bones Society years ago, there's been a couple of times where people have broken in. They found a particular room in the what they call the tomb. Isn't that, you know?
Yeah, that's such a joyous place. Yes.
Yeah, and inside the tomb they had a room where they had all this Nazi memorabilia. It was like a shrine to Nazism. And, you know, some of the stuff that they talked about having in there, they would have had to have gotten from very high level people, you know, memorabilia of sorts. And when you get down to it, talking again about the Skull and Bones Society, which we probably ought to talk about in the next, if we have a next chapter of this.
If there is a next time.
Yeah.
No, we will. That's a good one to go to. And Sutton
I think that would be where we would start off and could really, you know, get more into what happened in America. But I think the Skull and Bones Society is like the American equivalent of the SS, the Order, you know, all the Hitlerian secret societies which we've been talking about. I mean, they overlap.
Yes, they do.
And I mean, really, when you get down to it, American money is what put Germany back on the map and put Hitler into power. And so, and those people have been very, very much a part of the American political scene, like we were talking about last week. The Harrimans are the biggest contributors to the Democratic Party, and Bill Clinton got elected with Harriman money. In fact, Pamela Harriman. And I thought it was Pamela Harriman was Averell Harriman's daughter, but I believe she was Averell Harriman's widow. At any rate, I may be wrong on that. But,
probably the same age. It's all right.
Yeah. She was the one who put Clinton.
That's no slip of the tongue. That's okay. You got it right.
You remember Sigmund Freud. Anyway,
right.
They believe that you know, I don't believe she's the lady that, you know, that put the guy in power, put the most money in his coffers, and That's how he got there. I mean, you got the Harrimans. That's one of the reasons why the Harrimans never really took a dive for some of the stuff that they did in connection with the Nazis. Is it had been a little tough for Roosevelt to bring them up on charges. You know what I mean?
Oh, look, that whole thing.
I mean, they put him in power.
Hey, look, I mean, check this out, though. Think about this. I mean, and believe me, I mean, I lived just south of their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You had Roosevelt on the East Bank of the Hudson. I mean, everything in the lower Hudson Valley is named Harriman. Right. Harriman State Park, Harriman this. And then you had another character, Tom Dewey. Who, you know, was he...
he ran for president, right?
Well, yeah, but... okay. I don't want to go any more far afield than this, but in that book written by Theobald, Final Secret of Pearl Harbor, right. He writes that Dewey knew, who didn't know, that Roosevelt and the cabinet were going to let the Japs hit Pearl Harbor.
Right.
There's no two ways about it. And Dewey, in the 44 election, wanted to go public with it, and then his party, Roosevelt's party, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, according to Theobald, told him, you open your mouth about it, and you'll be in prison for sedition.
Exactly.
So he shut up, but he lost the 44, and he lost the 48. He won it, but he lost it. So here you have three personages from that time, not necessarily on the same side, but heavy-duty shakers, and that would be FDR, and it would be Harriman, and it would be Dewey.
Right.
And I have to laugh because when you go up the New York Turnpike, damn, something's named that you can't go 10 miles without something named over, you know, for one of them being there, you know.
Right.
The Dewey rest stop and the Harriman this, you know. So.
You know, another thing we didn't talk about yet, but I'd like to talk about the next sequence is eugenics and the eugenics societies, and that really the generation of a lot of that came from the United States and Britain long before it got started in Germany.
Yeah, good point. And I did that thing with Sandhu. We touched upon that.
Right.
And if you go to the site, take a look at that. And you can also click on an article. I think Angie has it up now. A Zen Gardner's article about this whole new wave, and this also goes back to Clinton and Daddy Bush, and now Son Bush is kind of like coming in because I think Daddy Bush is a little bit worn out. And now we have Gates and all these people going to do so many good things for us, and man, they got eugenics everywhere in the back of their mind. So, watch
that was such a popular idea.
Yes, it was.
Among the elites, you know. I have a good article here by a guy who was the son of a German soldier in World War II, and it's called The Men Behind Hitler, and he's very anti-Nazi, and he wrote a really good article with a summary of eugenics, and he kind of talks about, you know, how this idea, how popular it became in Germany. But my point is that it really, the biggest emphasis for it wasn't among the German elite. No. It was among the American and the British elite.
You're absolutely right.
And the Rockefellers and the Harrimans and Prescott Bush were the biggest promoters of that.
What I said to Paul, and I'll just say to you, anybody wants to check this out, there is a very telling exchange that was documented over in Britain between H.G. Wells and Francis Galton about what is really needed, selective breeding.
Right.
And also, as Wells said, and Galton wouldn't go there. And I'll be honest with you, Wells just about called him out in the language that they use, tantamount to being a pussy. And he said to him, he goes, you know, what is the problem with slaying the hindmost, like the animals do? You can go to galton.org, GALTON.org. You will see a transcript of a meeting. I cannot remember it right now. I wasn't prepared to do this. Maybe I'll put that up as well. You ought to see the exchange that takes place there.
Right.
You know, and I'm not blaming the Brits for this solely, and certainly not the people, but the elites. Same thing here.
You know, the people in the ordinary citizens in almost any country are okay. It's the elites. The elites that, I mean, and most people in most countries don't have any way to get rid of those people. You know? That's the sad part, is like the ordinary American, the ordinary Brit, or the ordinary German, it really didn't have any idea of what was really going on behind the scenes, and couldn't do much about it anyway. You know, everything's controlled.
But I mean, what you just said. I mean, if you had to distill, I guess, the history of the world, what else do you come down to?
elites. Elites controlling it.
And there's fewer of them, but they control how many people and militaries and such.
Right.
And you got to wonder how they can get that. They can pull that off, but they do.
They do through propaganda to a great extent. And, you know, we were talking about it the other day, that the elites in this country started to control the media starting in the late 19th century.
Okay.
Once they controlled the media, first the newspapers and then radio and then eventually television, once you control the media, you've got it. You've got it wired. You can do practically anything you want. And now, you know, with the new laws which, you know, allow for a particular corporation to own, you know, as many radio stations or television stations as they want within a certain area, you know, there's no rebuttal. No. There's no way that you can get any information other than what's coming down, you know.
No, and that's another thing we were talking about also. Well, I won't get into now, but I'll talk to you about it later.
Sure.
It's like, how many times do you wish that people who really have together about the way things are, they really can't get a decent soapbox on you know, mainstream TV or whatever. I mean, they throw out Jesse Ventura there, and it's like, yeah, great. He's really got all our best wishes in mind. I mean, come on, give me a break. The guy's doing it for money.
He's kind of a circus master there.
He's doing it for money, know? Yeah. And I mean, so that's the only person to get to the Today Show. You know, now I will tell you this. I did quickly look up what I was referring to, and you can go to Galton.org, click on eugenics, and you'll come up with a line that says eugenics, its definition, scope, and aims. And the transcript, to a certain degree, of what took place there in 1904 was recorded in the American Journal of Sociology. You got to read that to believe that. And I'll put a link up to that as well. I just wanted to complete that thought because, you're right.
Galton would have been a very old man at that time. I was looking, I've got some material here. I was going to talk about eugenics if we got to it. And it says that Galton was born in 1822, so he would have been, 82 years old then?
You know, I don't even know that. I didn't realize that because certainly he was together.
Yeah.
But they kind of threw that whole thing on him, too, about this eugenics as an extension coming out of the Darwins.
Yeah. It says Galton extended Darwin's theory of natural selection into a concept of deliberate social intervention, which he held to be the logical application of evolution to the human race. Galton was by no means satisfied to let evolution take its course freely, having decided to improve the human race through selective breeding. Brought about through social intervention, he developed a subject which he called eugenics, the principle of which was that by encouraging better human stock to breed and discouraging the reproduction of less desirable stock, the whole race could be improved. This is from Bernard Schreiber's book, or article I was telling you about, The Men Behind Hitler. And he's very much against, you know, all of that. He described Galton as a very erratic in his thought processes. He was unable to complete research in even one area. Hardly would he begin a research project before throwing out a theory and then moving on to a new field, leaving the proof of the theory to others. He was so fascinated with Darwin's theory that he spent an unusually lengthy period of years trying to prove that mental abilities were hereditary. In 1869, he published his book, Hereditary Genius, and in 1883, Inquiries into Human Faculty. In his inquiries, he undertook to transfer his hereditary theories from the individual to the whole race.
Honestly, Charles Darwin and Galton, I don't think were, again, the sharpest tools in the shed.
No.
But I think they were used for whatever purposes. I look at H.G. Wells on one end, and then you had Huxley also.
Yeah.
The father of.
Well, you know, Darwin wasn't happy about what happened with his theories.
Well, this goes back to, I think, Erasmus, too, but Charles ran with it, apparently. But I don't think he really, I don't...
Here's what Schreiber says about it. He says, Charles Darwin was a very humane man who probably would have been greatly enraged at the extremes to which his theories were taken. He had made a tragic error in attempting to extend the biological law of the struggle for survival to the social life of man. In so doing, he played into the hands of experts of later generations by giving them the impressive scientific justification for their barbaric actions of natural selection, preservation of the favored races, and the struggle for life. It was passages of the following type in the Descent of Man that would have been most welcomed by them. And he said, with savages, the weak in body and mind are soon eliminated, and those that survive commonly exhibit a vigorous state of health. We civilized men, on the other hand, do our utmost to check the process of elimination. We build asylums for the imbecile, the maimed, and the sick. We institute poor laws, and our medical men exert their utmost skill to save the life of everyone to the last moment. There's no reason to believe that vaccination has preserved thousands who, from a weak constitution, would formerly have succumbed to smallpox. Thus, the weak members of civilized societies propagate their kind. No one who has attended to the breeding of domestic animals will doubt that this must be highly injurious to the race of man. It's surprising how soon a want of care or care wrongly directed leads to the degeneration of a domestic race. But excepting in the case of man himself, hardly anyone is so ignorant as to allow their worst animals to breed. Well, he was saying he was a humane man and all that. I don't see what he said there as being particularly humane.
No.
It's like he's talking about human beings as if they're livestock.
But if we could tie this up, honestly, when you think about the collective mentality.
Right.
Well, I mean, here we go again. It's like, look, we don't want you breeding because actually you're going to diminish or deteriorate or however you want to call it, denigrate the gene pool. So how about if you just check out?
Yeah.
I
think it's going to lead to, and it did lead to infanticide in Nazi Germany. They first started off, their first, quote, mercy killings were of infants that were horribly deformed or, had some very bad hereditary disease. And when they first started off doing that, this was long before they started killing the Jews and the Slavs and the other people in the concentration camps. But when they first started doing that, they did it on the sly. They did it secretly. They would hit these people up with a large amount of morphine, and they thought they were, being merciful to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then they started off killing the mentally ill with the same kind of thing, and then they, there were, to their credit, there were churchmen, there were ministers and people within the churches in Germany that got wind of this and started to complain to the Nazis, and that took a lot of guts to complain to them about something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them wound up in concentration camps themselves.
And actually, the reason that the eugenics movement got kiboshed in the United States is pretty much the interruption that was World War II.
Right.
And then when some of that stuff leaked out...
when they started finding out about the concentration camps and what they had done, and that was all in the name of racial hygiene.
Yeah, but even the whole thing about, Lebensborn and all this stuff, I mean, all the stuff that they were pulling off, what Mengele was doing, when that came out, Rockefeller and the Population Council and all this stuff just kind of like went away for a while.
Right.
But now,
that
it's back.
Prescott Bush, he ran for Congress, I believe, in 48, or may have been 48, I'm not sure, 46. Anyway, when he first ran in Connecticut for Congress or the Senate, I can't remember which, he was had some problems and didn't get elected the first time because people found out about his connection to eugenics. And because of what had happened with the Nazis, and eugenics had been given such a bad name by the Nazis,
yep.
and it deserves the bad name
yep.
it got,
mm-hmm.
and still deserves it. But anyway, it smeared him, and he lost, and somehow or another, he managed to kind of escape that image, or I guess it just wasn't played up the next time he ran, and he was elected.
Exactly. You're right. I mean, they reinvent themselves. All of a sudden, things go away, and everybody forgets about it, and bang, he gets in because he's supposed to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking about the Skull and Bones Society, which is, basically the equivalent of the Hitlerian secret societies. The Skull and Bones Society and their membership and their friends and affiliates are the people that really pumped up eugenics in this country.
Yep. Okay. All right, we're up to 2 hours. We'll bring it to an end there, but we're going to come back a third time. And while you're here, let me just ask you, you got any idea, as you take a look at the material you've covered and that which you want to cover, where we might be going in round 3?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about basically the Skull and Bones Society and the financial support from Wall Street for the fledgling Nazi Party.
Mm-hmm.
and through Fritz Thiessen, who was a very big friend of the Bonesmen. And then we can go through, I'd like to talk about the Vatican support through the Knights of Malta of Hitler, how Franz von Papen and the Catholic Central Party put Hitler into office in 1932. Talk about the support that was given to him by at the time, the German papal nuncio, Pacelli, who became Pius XII and gave him money and support. And then I'd like to talk about the rat lines that the Vatican ran to help Nazi criminals escape. And then we can go into Project Paperclip and wherever you want to go from there.
Okay. All right. So we'll bring it to a close, and we'll pick it up next week if all goes well. And Larry, thanks for dropping by and talking about that, because it's amazing.
Sorry, I got a little too wordy maybe on the secret societies, but it seemed like it needed a little more background there.
Listen, you're a thinker be eaten where too much is never enough. that much I brought over from beyond the grass,
Yeah. Yeah, and look up a picture of Guido von List and tell me if that doesn't look like Gabby Hayes with a beret on.
Oh, that's such an ugly visual. Yeah, okay, never mind.
And Gabby Hayes was kind of a misogynist too. He didn't like women. He was always.
Oh no! Don't start with Gabby, please. Next, you're going to go after Roy and Trigger. All right. Hang in there for a second, folks. This has been Thinker Be Eaten with Larry, the contractor guy, about the Nazis, and we are what we hated. We'll see you next week.